Doctors and nurses. Have you ever witnessed a couple having a child that was obviously not the father's? What happened? A friend of mine who was a nurse told me about helping with a vasectomy when the doctor saw that the patient, a married father of two children, was clearly infertile and would have been all his life. Because the patient took Valium before the local anesthetic, the doctor requested a follow-up appointment. During this visit, the doctor explained the medical condition to the patient. I have no idea what the fallout was. After I shared my experience, another person shared a similar story. Here's what they said. A friend of mine was going through hell for the same reason. Went for a vasectomy, discovered he had been infertile his whole life, did a paternity test on his 3 kids, and none of them were his biological kids. First, after my friend did the vasectomy and the follow-up visit, the doctor told him that the chances of him having kids were almost a miracle. After he told his sister-in-law, she suggested a paternity test. When I asked him what the issue was, all he said to me, and I'm translating from Dominican Spanish, was, "There were a couple of tubes missing, brother." The sister-in-law had been saying for years that her sister was a narcissistic person, but nobody took her seriously, not even me. His attorney started both a divorce and a case of challenge of paternity, but if this last thing had gone in favor of my friend, his name would have been erased from the birth certificate. The kids would have lost his name and would no longer have been recognized as the children's father. So no child support, but also no visitation rights, etc. This took time and there was almost no chance of an appeal since the biological dad apparently would have started the opposite and would have sued for acknowledgement of paternity, meaning having his last name in the birth certificate, etc. But no, my friend did not accuse her of fraud. I asked my dad this when he introduced my friend to his attorney, and they both said that might have looked vindictive to the court. At most, they could have claimed bad faith, but it was a long shot. Why was my friend going forward with the challenge of paternity? The main reason was that 2 of the kids looked like their mother and the other one looked like the paternal grandfather. My friend was afraid that in the future he might start resenting or hating the kids. By the therapist's advice, he was writing letters explaining to the kids why he did it in case one day one of them came looking for him. No clue what he was writing, that was between him and the kids. The second reason was that he thought they wouldn't remember him. The third reason, he said, was that if he still took care of the kids, he would be rewarding his soon-to-be ex and her lover. This one was for 2 frequently asked questions. He had moved in with me and my wife fully, but he was an engineer and was working in another province, and the commute would have been a 4.5-hour round trip. So he stayed at the place his company rented for him and spent the weekends here for now. And yes, he was doing better. He was no longer angry and irritable. He told me therapy and my cats had helped. Yes, he still cried because he missed the kids. He confessed to me that his brain was telling him, "Forget her, those kids aren't yours." But in his heart, he knew those were his kids, and he would forever love them, and every night, he cried himself to sleep looking at pictures and videos of them. Yes, that broke my heart and was the reason I wished I could do more. I was trying to be the bestest friend for him. He did not deserve any of this. Story 2. When I was a student nurse, there was this one couple. The mother was Asian and the husband was white. The husband had a brother, African American. He was adopted from what I remembered. The mother had been in labor for around 12 hours. They were very excited to see their baby. I remembered the father had paced the entire shift back and forth in the waiting room. When it came time to mount the mother on the table, he asked the doctor if he could be in the room. He was grinning like crazy. It was a very positive energy. You could almost get completely absorbed by it. The doctor was a nice guy. He let us get him some throwaway scrubs and let him stay in the room. All in all, the actual birthing process was pretty standard. However, when the baby came out, then came the rough part. He was a normal, healthy, half African American boy, around 3 kilograms. I just looked at the baby, then looked at the father and watched his face go from joy to puzzlement to horror in around 10 seconds. The mother called out for a child and the doctor, all business, tended to the baby. I'm pretty sure at that moment the father broke because he sort of just stepped back and kept saying, "What the heck?" under his breath. I didn't get to see much of them for the next 2 hours, but I was there when the mother was brought to her room. Her husband and his brother were there as well, and she was talking to them. From what I saw, she was trying to console her husband, and his brother was trying to hug him. The husband kind of just kept shrugging off his brother's arms and crying into his hands. It was a really tough thing to see, but all in all, it wasn't really as dramatic as you would expect. Oh my God, this stork just delivered the wrong baby. Jokes aside, this is really awful. Story 3. I was a midwife. I once had a woman come to my clinic unannounced. She wasn't the patient, but I was in the National Health Service, so I received her anyway. She had a man with her. She knew she was about 3 months pregnant, but she hadn't come for any antenatal care. I asked if she'd slept with someone the night before. I looked at the partner as the woman said yes, and he said, "Nothing to do with me. I'm just the baby daddy." Turns out she had a new boyfriend at home. This was just the guy she had been with 3 months before. I popped her up on the table and had to tell her that she was about 5 months along, but I would arrange a scan to confirm. The dude just got up and walked out. Turns out there was a third guy 5 months ago. A friend shared a similar story. They said they also had a patient like this. She was 28 weeks or something and pretended her last period was 2 months prior to his visit with her, and that his boyfriend of 3 months was the only potential father. When I explained that he was not, she asked when was the latest she could get rid of it. Story 4. I'm a doctor, and the story actually involves my colleague. So I was friends in med school with this guy who we'll call Nut. We weren't close friends, but we had some common friends and we shared some rotations together. And there was this girl named Mary. Mary was already married at the time and had a little daughter. Nut and Mary were close, but Mary got held back because she got pregnant and therefore had to stop studying temporarily. During that time, Nut and I became interns, and Nut began hanging out often with another girl named Belle. Nut and Belle weren't that close or physical with each other, so it came as a surprise when 2 months before the internship ended, we found out that Belle was pregnant. Turns out that the two were FWBs the entire time. Anyway, they graduated, and eventually, Belle gave birth to a baby boy who looked like Nut's miniature clone. It was as if the baby got nothing out of the mother. At all. Some of us even joked that Nut's genes were just so strong that he didn't create offspring. He created clones. Now, Mary eventually caught up with her studies and entered a junior internship, so she got to rotate with some of us. And when she showed us the picture of her baby boy, he also looked exactly like Nut. Not that we knew what Mary's husband looked like and what Mary's daughter looked like. Her son looked just like Nut. So much that if you placed her son beside Belle's, you could easily mistake them for twins. We did just that. Not sure what happened to them now. I moved to a nearby hospital, but I never really talked to any of the three. However, the last update I received from Nut was this. Nut's partner was a mutual friend who claimed he wouldn't marry. She and their son were left in a city approximately 4 hours away where Belle worked. Mary's husband, daughter, and son were in the US. Mary's husband was studying aeronautics or something similar, and Nut and Mary were on duty on the same day at the same hospital. Dude, we seriously gotta stop Nut from spreading his or there'll be little peanuts everywhere. This nut job is one sneaky fella. Story 5. This happened to me. She didn't say anything about me possibly not being the father, but for a host of reasons, I had my doubts. It was pretty obvious I was detached during the delivery. I was also the only male there because her father didn't want to be in the room, and my father had passed away a couple of months earlier. I felt lots of pressure from the nurses and the female doctor to cut the cord and sign all the forms. Everyone I told about my doubts basically told me I was being the bad guy and not supporting her. I felt so alone during that time. Even my mother wasn't on my side. She too told me I needed to stop being such a horrible person and support this woman. It was crazy unfair to me. I was absolutely lost for most of the pregnancy. 1 week after the baby was born, I had the baby tested. Turns out I was right all along. The baby was not mine. It wasn't until then that the mother came clean about everything. Both the mother and child are out of my life now, but to be honest, I still feel a bit like I abandoned that child, and I don't know if this feeling will ever go away. I wish the child the best and hope the child is raised in the most excellent of ways. Story 6. My dad told me this story. He was a non-commissioned officer in the Army. One night, he received a call saying that the wife of one of his soldiers was in the hospital expecting a baby. His first response was, "So why are you calling me?" It turns out that the wife was 99.9% sure the baby wasn't his, and she needed someone to make sure he didn't go crazy at the hospital. So my dad drives down there and he finds a soldier trying to push past the doctors into the delivery room. He's screaming that he has a right to be in there, etc. My dad puts his hand on his shoulder, a preface to physically restraining him, and tells him that he can't go inside. The guy must have realized that he really wasn't getting in there because he just sank to his knees, started crying, and kept saying, "I just wanted to see my son being born." It was apparent that he wasn't going to hurt anyone. So they got him to the waiting room and my dad left thinking, I just watched the end of someone's marriage. Come Monday morning, the guy comes in with the biggest smile, walking around and showing everyone pictures of his black baby. He was white. Of course, they questioned and ribbed him out about it, but he would just proudly say, "That's my son." That was a best-case scenario for a messed-up situation, right? Not sure how the family's doing now, but it seems like the kid would grow up with a father, or two, who loved him. That soldier's totally blurst. It takes serious willpower to handle that without going full nuclear. Do you wish people would be more responsible in bringing little humans into this world? Then show me you mean it by giving this video a like and subscribing to my channel. Story 7. This actually happened to me. No one mentioned their suspicions to me. 2 years later, it came out that my daughter wasn't biologically mine. By that time, I only saw her as my daughter and nothing else. After months of depression and confusion, I worked it out where I left the mom and I adopted the little girl. She was raised as my daughter and I don't see her any other way. The adoption went like this. I was living in New York for a year after I found out about my daughter. I was coming back to Ohio every other weekend to visit her and spend time with her. They called the biological dad, who apparently knew the whole time. His words were he didn't want anything to do with that ugly baby. I was pretty upset to hear that because I didn't see how anyone could think she was ugly or hate her. Anyway, I finally got the job transfer, and after long talks with her mother, I was able to convince her to let me adopt her. To make things more complicated, my ex also had a son who was 2 years older than my daughter. His biological dad passed away from meds. I started dating their mom when he was an infant, and he started calling me dad when he was able to talk. I was also able to adopt him as well. I have 2 adopted kids and no relation with their mother. I do not regret anything about what I did. I don't see these kids as anything but my own. Story 8. I had a mom-to-be who narrowed the options for the baby daddy down to her top 3. She was having a C-section and didn't understand why all 3 potential dads couldn't come into the theater. She then asked if we could rotate them through. Maybe she'd let the one that was there when the baby came out to be the real daddy. It took all my professionalism to smile politely. Story 9. Okay, I have two stories that aren't exactly what the OP asked, but are still applicable. First, a woman came to the ER with abdominal pain. She was there with a girlfriend. We ran a pregnancy test per protocol. Never trust a patient when it comes to intimate history. So I got to break the news to the lesbian couple that one of them was unexpectedly pregnant. And yes, I tried to tell the patient the news discreetly, but she insisted anything I had to say should be done in front of a girlfriend. Okay, but I don't think that was the surprise she was expecting. The daddy showed up, commotion ensued, security had to get involved when the girlfriend started hurting the daddy. Second, a young mom brought her newborn to the ER to be evaluated for something fairly minor. New parent didn't really know what she was doing. This young guy was also in the room, so I asked about his relationship with the patient. He said he was the stepdad. Apparently, he had been dating the mom for about a month. The baby is about 3 weeks old. It took me a few minutes to wrap my head around that one. I really hope that dumb guy didn't sign the birth certificate. Story 10. I was a postpartum nurse for several years. I had several dads say the baby wasn't theirs because the baby wasn't black enough, suggesting their partners must have been with a white boy behind his back. Actually, it takes a few days for the baby's pigment to darken. A senior nurse taught me that one way to find out is to look at the child's jewels. If it's a boy, those will tell you how dark the pigment of their skin will be, but I could tell these men were just looking for any excuse to ditch their babies. It's very sad. Hey, no jokes, alright? But hey, checking their jewels? That's a solid tip, man. Story 11. I work in an NICU, and frequently babies will come down to our units accompanied by their father while their mom is still being taken care of. It's usually the time when fathers will question us about how to do a paternity test or ask questions like, does this baby look half black to you? Or, would you say this baby could be mine or not? We've also had an occasion where mom has admitted to us that dad isn't the baby's father, but we're not legally able to say anything. So we just have to pretend we know nothing and we'll submit a social work consult to look into the situation a bit more. Story 12. I'm not a doctor, but my wife grew up in a really small town, although she wasn't born there. When she got her first crush on a boy and told her best friend, their friend was like, did you talk to your mom yet? Apparently, adultery was so widespread in this area that it was common practice for girls to talk to their mom about crushes and who their crush's parents were, so they didn't end up dating their half-sibling. Story 13. I was a nurse for a urologic surgeon, so he had lots of vasectomies. A guy came in pissed off because he had gotten his wife pregnant after his vasectomy. He had never originally followed up to make sure his swimmers were dead. The doctor had him leave a sample to look under the microscope. After going back to the exam room, the doctor told him his vasectomy had been successful. The guy just walked out. Story 14. I'm not a medical worker, but my uncle's mom was one of 5 sisters from Brooklyn, New York. One Christmas a couple of years ago, one of the sisters got them 23andMe kits. When you send in your information, you can opt in to be notified if similar DNA is found to find distant relatives and stuff. Only one of the sisters got a result saying she was related to this family. Let's call them the Romano family. All of the sisters were really confused as to why the younger sister was the only one to get this result, until one of them goes, hey, wasn't there a Romano family that lived in the apartment floor above us growing up? When they asked their mom about this, now in her 80s, she simply lit a cig and told them that the test was full of crap and to never bother her with it again. Maybe someone slept in the wrong bedroom back in the day. Story 15. At a hospital where I was a med student, there was a baby born with eye drops, a condition where baby inherits 2 faulty copies of a red cell gene, one from each parent. Unfortunately, the baby passed away shortly after birth. The parents came in for genetic counseling, and testing revealed that the woman's husband did not carry the alpha thalassemia gene. The couple asked about the chance of another baby of theirs having this condition. The doctors were honest and told them 0%. They left it at that. Story 16. I'm not a doctor or a nurse. When my wife was in the hospital giving birth, there was another girl in the same room. Her husband was absolutely in love with her and the soon-to-be-born son. I spoke a lot with this guy. He talked about how we're going to play with our kids and so on. After the birth, I never saw him again, but I saw the child. No way it was his. By the time she was in the hospital, he had moved out and filed for divorce. She tried to sue him for child support and won. He left the country and didn't pay. She's struggling with huge financial problems. My wife still has contact with her. No happy ending here. Story 17. Obligatory, not a doctor's story, but I know a couple that were very excited to have twins. Baby's birthday comes, mom and dad are in the delivery room. Baby 1 comes out and it's immediately clear they aren't his. He's white, she's white. The babies are, well, they're not. The entire community was shaken. They're divorced now. A few people are saying that it could be a throwback to a few generations ago. It was not in this case. The DNA test proved that they were, in fact, the children of her coworker. Story 18. My husband is a surgical technician. Years ago, he helped deliver a baby via emergency C-section. The baby was black and born to 2 very white parents. The dad freaked out and left the hospital with a mom in tears. The doctor convinced him to get a paternity test, and he did end up being the father. Genetics are weird. Finally, someone got the rare gotcha. Story 19. My mom's friend has 3 sons with her ex-husband. 2 of them look like him, and the second one looks a lot like the man she left her husband for. But of course, they didn't get together until after she divorced her husband. It doesn't help how our new partner very clearly has a favorite kid. Story 20. I had a doctor who thought my boy wasn't mine because he came out blonde with blue eyes. I'm half native with dark hair and dark green eyes, and my dad is a blonde, blue, green-eyed dude. My wife is a very dark brunette, and her dad is blonde with blue-green eyes. He got grandfathered in. He's genetically tested his mind, but the doctor was very, very iffy. Also, my brother's best friend didn't resemble his father while growing up, so he became more and more suspicious. Father eventually did a DNA test when my brother's friend was in middle school and found he was not his biological child. The parents split up, with the older daughter going with the father because she resembled him, so he was sure about her. Story 21. I worked in a restaurant right after high school. There was a couple who worked there too. When the girlfriend got pregnant, she left him and moved back to her family in Alaska. After a month or so, the boyfriend managed to gather enough cash to follow her. He dropped out of college and got a job on her dad's fishing boat to support his new family. Months later, the baby was born, and it became more obvious why the girl took off, because they were both white and that baby was black. Story 22. Doctor here. It wasn't my patient, it was my daughter. I knew she wasn't mine the moment she was crowned and had confirmation after state-mandated testing came back within the next couple of weeks. I chose to raise her regardless, but the last couple of years have been, shall we say, challenging. Hey, I know you're craving more stories of dads losing it at doctors, so go ahead and watch OBGYNs. What's the most what the thing a husband has said? Story 5 had me face-palming so hard. You don't want to miss it.